Right. So we're solving two CAT 2023 RCs, right? Now, what happens in CAT is we have 3 slots. And earlier, when we had 2 slots, we used to have a trend. Like 1 year, you could have verbal, which was tough. Another year, verbal would be easy. Some other section would be tough and so on. So CAT 2017, verbal was pretty easy. 2018 also was easy, maybe a little bit tougher. CAT 2019, verbal was really hard, right? But then from 2020, after COVID struck, and we have these 3 slots. So what they did was they have been having a different, at least definitely from 2021, they've been having a different section, which is tough, right? So if you are in slot 1, you could have a tough verbal. And then when you go to slot 2, verbal would be doable and you might have like quant or DILR, which is on the tougher side, right? Probably the thinking could have been, see, if there are only 2 slots, even if you're in the second slot, there's not that much feedback that you're able to get from those who are from slot 1. Or it could be that, that particular IAM feels that, maybe making one section a little bit tougher. Not even that IAM, I would say that convener might have a view, right? Okay, now let's come to the second one. This is another RC, which is basically there in slot 2, the tough slot. And this is something which seems to start a little bit difficult. But then, when you're reading that, okay, Netflix and all is mentioned, the common idea will be, let me, give it a go. Because if it's something about OTT or something about media, entertainment and all, probably doable, right? So as always, let's start with the questions. The author sees the rise of Netflix in Europe as, okay, so we'll read if we are getting it somewhere, like if it's a direct single, we can then and there look to solve it. If not, we will just solve it at the end. Based on information provided in the passage, all of the following are true except. Direct multiple question, 3 of these are going to be true. Whichever is not, that would become an answer. So we'll have to go back and check. Based only on information provided in the passage, which one of the following hypothetical Netflix shows would be most successful with audiences across the EU? So this is again a very typical inferential question that we have in CAT, right? Where what's happening is we have been told something about Netflix and something about Netflix in the EU. Based on that, we have to figure out what type of show will be successful. So it won't be directly given that such and such type of show is successful, though there is something which is very close to it when we solve, you'll see. But typically the point is that, something about Netflix in EU is given, and based on that, we've got to infer what is going to be successful and what is not, right? Last one, which one of the following research findings would weaken the author's conclusion in the final paragraph? So going to be about, inferential question, but going to be about the final paragraph. So once we read it, we can immediately look to solve it. So what we'll do is, the rise of Netflix in Europe, if there's something that we get then and there, we'll solve it. Otherwise, everything we will solve at the end. Umberto Eco, an Italian writer, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right, was right when he said that the language of Europe is translation. Why? Europe, so many countries, right? Different languages, think about it, English, French, Italian, there's so many more, right? Which are there, Belgian, Polish, bunch of them. So he's saying that the language of Europe is translation. So it's obviously something which we are not taking literally, right? So it's more of a like a humorous thing that he's saying. Netflix and other deep-pocketed global firms speak it well. So they understand translation well, or they're able to translate, right? Just as the EU employs a small army of translators and interpreters to turn intricate laws or impassioned speeches of Romanian MEPs into the EU's 24 official languages, so do the likes of Netflix. It now offers dubbing in 34 languages and subtitling in a few more. So what is Netflix doing? Netflix is basically showing all languages, right? So we can actually I'm just trying to say most, right? We don't know for sure if all are there or not, but most seem to be there, right? Dubbing is there in 34 languages, subtitling in more than 34 languages. So even if dubbing is not there, subtitles will definitely be there. I'm sure all of us here, whoever's watched Netflix, would have watched some of the shows which have been dubbed, right? So Money Heist is there, then Dark, I think, was another one. Similarly, even Indian languages, right? A lot of times Indian movies which are made in so I personally, for example, have watched Tamil or Malayalam movies, which, in Hindi or with the subtitles. Subtitles what I prefer, but that's like my personal preference. So different people, all of you, I think, would have had some experience of watching some movie or some show not in the language in which it has been shot, right? So, but coming back to this, so what's happening? Netflix definitely is understanding this, and any particular show or movie is being dubbed into multiple languages and the subtitles in even more languages. The economics of European productions are more appealing too. American audiences are more willing than before to give dubbed or subtitled viewing a chance. So the economics is also something which is more appealing. Why? Because American audiences, they are perfectly fine to watch these, right? Which means that non-English shows. Why non-English shows? Because English shows, why would you dub, right? So if you're dubbing or subtitling, so it has to be shows in other European or other EU languages. This means shows such as Lupin, a French crime caper on Netflix, can become global hits. In 2015, about 75% of Netflix's original content was American. Now the figure is half. So what was happening? Initially, 3/4 of the content which Netflix shot, right, their own original content. So they obviously, stream a lot of shows and movies which are produced by other productions, but their own content, 3/4 of it used to be produced in the US. Now it's only about 50%. So there's so much more which has shifted definitely to Europe as one of the areas. Netflix has about, notice that, I didn't care much about the name of the company and all, right? So the number is important. If the author's countering it, okay, then I'll remember that. Otherwise, here we understand that a lot of non-American content, especially European content, is being made. Netflix has about 100 productions underway in Europe, which is more than big public broadcasters in France or Germany. So the public broadcasters, right? Say like Doordarshan in India. So whatever is the equivalent, they are producing fewer productions than Netflix. Of course, they are looking here at Netflix across all European countries. So that's there, but still it's a sizable number. Not everything works across borders. So EU languages and also EU origin. Let me not put shows. I'll just put it as media, right? Movie, shows, whatever. So this is something which is happening. But not everything works across borders. Comedy sometimes struggles. Whodunits and bloodthirsty maelstorms between arch Romans and uppity tribesmen have a more universal appeal. So little bit of vocabulary here. The things which are working, we know that a crime caper, so something on crime is working. What is a whodunit? Whodunit is nothing but what you call your murder mysteries, right? So I'll actually write that, because that's easier. So whodunit is it's more of like a book term which is there. So who did it? It's like that, right? So who killed whoever was killed, or who was the robber, like that. So a little bit vocabulary we need to know. Here again, bloodthirsty maelstorms. Even if we don't know the meaning of the word maelstorms, there's like Romans on one side and tribesmen on the other. It's bloodthirsty, right? So it's probably violent shows, fights, things like that. So we can put it as war or violence. So these are the ones which work. Crime, of course, it's one example which we've been given, but the other two we know work. What doesn't work is comedy. Sometimes comedy doesn't work. This is just my symbol for not. You can use anything, right? N, put across, whatever, right? Some do it better than others. Barbarians aside, German TV is not always built for exports. Say one executive being polite. So something around barbarians and all, that might work. Other than that, generally German shows will not work, right? So some do it better than others. So some countries maybe do it better. Maybe France does it better because, one French show has become a global hit, right? A bigger problem is that national broadcasters still dominate. So national broadcasters still dominate. In the sense, probably people are watching more shows by national broadcasters. That's something which is made clear in the next sentence anyway. Streaming services such as Netflix or Disney Plus account for about 1/3 of all viewing hours, even in markets where they are well established. So they don't have a lot of market share. They have about 1/3. And national broadcasters are able to probably have a major chunk of the remaining 2/3, right? The generation of teens staring at phones is outnumbered by their elders who prefer to gawp at the box. What could this box be? Europe is an aging continent. It's older people who are watching. We know they're watching national broadcasters. Has got to be the TV, right? Again, little bit we need to infer over here. That's why I was saying in the beginning that, even though this is about Netflix, it's obviously not super easy, right? And why is that? If we write a very easy RC about OTT, everyone's going to get it and everyone's going to probably get 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4, right? Provided they find that RC. So they are trying to make it slightly more difficult, or rather they've chosen a passage which is not super easily written, right? There are certain things which we need to know what is whodunits. If we don't know maelstorms, it's still fine. We can infer it. it. Uppity also, if we don't know, it's fine, right? We just know that, some form of like, war or fights are going on. But little bit we need to like, understand. And it's not that hard to infer, right? If you have young people who are staring at phones and you're contrasting it with someone else who are older people, where would they watch shows? Older people who are not watching Netflix or OTT and all, most likely they'll be watching in TV, right? So you can think of it this way. If you remember the term idiot box, nothing like it, right? In Brussels and national capitals, the prospect of Netflix as a cultural hegemon is seen as a threat. So there are certain countries where they are also seeing Netflix and all as a threat. Cultural sovereignty is the watchword of European executives, worried that the Americans will eat their lunch. As in, so the European broadcasters and all, they are concerned, right? They are thinking, hey, if people start watching Netflix more and more and more, obviously they're going to be out of business or they are going to lose revenue. So that is what it means by eating their lunch. It's more of an idiomatic phrase. To be fair, Netflix content sometimes seems stuck in an uncanny valley somewhere in the mid-Atlantic with local quirks stripped out. So it's not connecting as well with the audience. So certain local quirks, so local oddities, local odd things, they basically stripped out. So it doesn't seem, it is probably not something which European countries, the viewers are really identifying with, because the local parts are sort of, it seems like there's nothing local. Like it might be set in Europe or the story might be there, but it wouldn't be culturally the same. Netflix originals tend to have fewer specific cultural references than shows produced by domestic rivals. So let's say local quirks we don't understand, here itself now it becomes clear, right? The company used to have an imperial mode of commissioning with executives in Los Angeles cooking up ideas French people might like. So it's not that, they are taking, they were taking the view of French people or Belgian people in Brussels or wherever, right? But now what is happening? Now Netflix has offices across Europe. So at least there are people in all of these countries. But ultimately, the big decisions rest with American executives. This makes European politicians also nervous, right? So these are the things which work. Now the issues, what are the issues which are there? It's not very local, right? And the decisions are being taken by Netflix HQ in the US. So you can write HQ, you can write, probably write something like Netflix US decides, something like that, right? So this is an issue in the sense that they might get wrong, but even politicians are not happy, right? Why is somebody sitting over there sort of deciding what content is there, and politically or ideologically different type of content can obviously come up. They should not be. Who should not be? European politicians are nervous, but they should not be nervous. So this, of course, has to be the author's view. So let's understand why. And we have a question about the last paragraph as well. An irony of European integration is that it is often American countries that facilitate it, right? So why should European politicians not be nervous? It's ironic that, when it comes to European integration, so European countries integrating or EU countries integrating, it is often American companies that facilitate it. Google Translate makes European newspapers comprehensible, even if a little clunky, for the continent's non-polyglot. So anybody who doesn't know multiple languages, if they want to read something in French or Belgian or Danish or whatever, right? So they are able to do it with Google Translate, where Google, of course, or Alphabet is an American company, right? American social media companies make it easier for Europeans to talk politics across borders. Now, Netflix and Friends pump the same content into homes across the continent, making culture a cross-border endeavor too, right? So what is happening? This is something which is actually not bad. Why is it not bad? Because it can help with integration. Typically, if I was writing integration, I would use a small symbol here rather than finding the symbol. I just wrote the word. But please, wherever possible, use symbols, use shortcuts, right? So you can just write ENTG or something like that, right? But the main message here is Europeans or European politicians should not feel that Netflix is a bad thing, because a lot of times there are American companies which facilitate their integration, facilitate them coming together, such as Google Translate or social media. And Netflix, again, with everybody watching sort of, similar shows, they are going to, again, facilitate sort of like a cultural Integration, right? If Europeans are to share a currency, bail each other out in times of financial need, and share vaccines in a pandemic, then they need to have something in common, right? So if Europeans, I mean, you have EU, right? So you have the euro, the countries sort of like they have porous, borders, they help each other out, right? And apparently they also share vaccines. So if all of this has to happen, then they need to have something in common, even if it is just binging on the same series. Watching fictitious Northern and Southern Europeans tear each other apart 2000 years ago beats doing so in reality, right? So again, not something which, they're not going to tear each other apart today, but what is the author trying to say over here? If EU politicians or EU country politicians, they want their countries to sort of be integrated, they want their people to think of it as EU and not, our individual countries like France and Germany and Belgium and so on. What should they basically do? They need to have integration of some sort, right? Certain things like social media, Google Translate and all are helpful. Netflix is also something which will help. Why will Netflix help? Basically, it's going to culturally unite people because they're sort of watching the same shows, right? And even if it is something which is about like, Europeans sort of like, fighting each other in the past, if everybody is watching it, that is something which is helpful, that is uniting them. So the author is essentially saying it's better to watch Europeans only. I mean, it's better for Europeans to watch Europeans fighting against each other in the past. If all of them are going to do it, that is something which will prevent them fighting today, right? So we don't have to take this tearing each other apart now literally. We have to understand that the idea is that if there is a European country versus European country fight which happened 2000 years back and everyone is watching it, that is still good. Okay, so now let's look at we had one question which was about the last paragraph. So let's try to do that first. We've understood from the last paragraph that Netflix coming into Europe is actually something which is good for Europeans because it can culturally unite them, right? It has that potential. So let's look for something which is going to weaken that. Research shows that Netflix hits produced in France are very popular with North American audiences. Now, the thing is, we already know that, right? We've already been given an example of one French show which was very popular. Here we are talking about Netflix in Europe. So I have to look at it from the perspective of Europe, because this paragraph is about that. In this paragraph, the author is telling us that Netflix is actually, even if it is like, shows which are decided in the US, it's still good for Europeans because culturally it can sort of bring them together, right? Instead of looking at it as individual countries, they actually look at themselves as the European Union. I mean, I'm not talking about all European countries, of course. I'm just talking about the EU because that's what the, the passage has been largely about. So this is more from the US or North American perspective, so not super relevant. Research shows that older women across the EU enjoy watching romantic comedies on Netflix, whereas younger women prefer historical fiction dramas. So this is slightly undermining because instead of bringing all females or all people culturally together, now we know that, depending on your age, you might want to watch different things. However, if all older females like to watch, or most older females like to watch a certain set of show, at least they are united. And similarly, the younger ones are united. So culturally, at least there is some unity, right? And anyway, we know between old people, young people, there can be differences. So as long as a group of people are coming together, it's not weakening the author's point so much. Research shows there's a wide variance in the popularity and viewing of Netflix shows across different EU countries. This is a bigger issue, right? Here, at least I was told that, 1/4 of people like one type of show, 1/4 of people like one type of show. How am I saying 1/4? I'm just assuming that, females are half, then, younger females is 1/4 and older females 1/4. Of course, you'll have much smaller people and really older people who don't watch Netflix and all, but at least, two big groups, they were united. But here, what are we being told? There's a wide variance. So there's a lot of differences in the popularity and viewing of Netflix shows across different EU countries. So in different countries, different shows are popular. Now imagine if one show is popular in Germany, one show is popular in France, and one show is popular in Portugal, for instance, right? How are these three people of these three countries going to come together? That cultural unity, which was what the author was trying to say, is not actually there, right? So this most likely is going to be my answer, but let me look at 4 and see if it's better. Research shows that Netflix has been gradually losing market share to other streaming TV service providers. okay, if Netflix is losing share, it's not something which is impacting this paragraph, right? Other than we might think, okay, but if people are not watching Netflix at all, then how is it going to unite? However, the specific premise that the author has in this paragraph is that let Netflix come because it will culturally unite Europeans. So that is something which is not happening in the third option, right? Fourth option is slightly weakening because, if it's not popular itself, how will people watch it and sort of culturally unite? This also is trying to split it, but 3 is something which is definitely weakening the author's conclusion. To the extent that if somebody said no one in Europe is watching Netflix, even then you should go for the third option, because third option is really attacking the main point which the author is trying to make in the final paragraph. Okay. So if we had an option like, what if if the trend is showing that, people are not watching Netflix anymore, they're going for something else, they're watching TV or some other shows or something like that, still we will go for this. Okay, now this is now an easy one, right? So I actually didn't remember that murder mystery is directly given here, so should have probably written whodunits. But either way, so we know that crime, one show was popular. We know that murder mysteries and some form of war or violence and all, historical war or violence is something which is popular, and we know comedy is not. So we got to look for something around these, right? So straight up first option, a murder mystery drama set in North Africa and France. So murder mystery we know is popular, and we also know that they might prefer local content, local cultural stuff and all of that. So far this seems good. Let's see if there's something which is only set maybe across Europe or something like that. An Italian comedy show, we anyway know that comedy is something which is not working out, so forget it. An original German TV science fiction production, science fiction not given in the popular stuff. Plus, we have been told that a lot of German shows, they are not watched, right? Where is it given? Yeah, German TV is not always built for exports, which is a polite way of saying that people outside Germany are not liking German TV, German television shows or whatever, right? So this also we can eliminate. A transatlantic romantic drama set in Europe and America. I don't think anything about romance was mentioned. So we can straight go for the first option. Only thing we need to know here is from a vocabulary perspective, we need to know that whodunits are murder mystery. If you know that, you should really get it. If you don't know that, right, comedy show, we know that it is something which will not work. Right? Comedy sometimes struggles, right? We know that, they want local stuff. And we know that Germany is also something which is bad. So this we can eliminate, this we can eliminate. Between these two, right, the way to infer, I will acknowledge that this is something which is hard. It's not that easy to do it, right? But we have crime, right? So you could still take crime and think in terms of murder mystery. So that is one way to do it. The other way in which you can do it is romance is not mentioned here at all. What can I connect murder mysteries with? Then you think, okay, maybe Lupin or maybe whodunits. Whodunits, if you don't know the term, connecting it will be very difficult. So at least if you can connect the crime part, probably can still get it right. Another way to do it, this is a slightly riskier way, where you can say that, what, I don't know what whodunits are, but it doesn't seem to be something related to romance. It could more likely be something which is a murder mystery. And we know crime is helpful. So that is like an added point. But even if you chuck the crime, you could think that, what, whodunits? Probably murder mystery is a better word than romantic drama. It doesn't seem to suggest romance at all. So it's a slightly higher risk, a way to infer. It will sometimes work, it will sometimes not work. If it works, great. Even if it works 50% of the time, good. What I don't recommend is you skim through the passage and guess. But if there's some word you don't know and you're trying to infer, you can still go ahead like this. Let's put it this way, right? What do I know for sure? If I know that German stuff is not working in the US, what are the chances that it will work in EU? I would not be confident and say that it will work, because I definitely know of one country where it doesn't work, right? That is step one. Mm-hmm. The other way to do it is, see, you have to, that bit where you thought about borders, you have to ask yourself, when we are being told based on information provided in the passage, that means something is given in the passage which is going to help me address or help me find out what EU country people are going to want to watch, right? What's going to work in the EU, right? Audiences in the EU. So then you have to go back and understand, what? I probably misunderstood this as across the Atlantic in the US, because obviously, in the beginning, we are speaking about, these becoming global hits and all. So I understand where you're coming from. But if you have a question, and the question is very specifically saying that this is based on information from the passage, What can I interpret as information from the passage? This is the only thing which could be there, right? So, I mean, if across borders is a little hard to figure out. This would be an easier way for you to think, right? So across all three sections in CAT, if you're being asked a question like this, there is a way. So even in DILR, right? If you're being asked a question and there is no cannot be determined, that means that there is a way to figure it out. And Ila, one more thing you have to do is you have to ask yourself, if I know that I'm saying German TV is not for export, you interpret it as export to US, it's fine. But if I already know that German shows are not watched a lot in one country, I should, unless it's very specifically given that it doesn't work in the US but is working in the EU, I will not go for an option with German TV, right? Because the only thing I know about German TV is that it is unpopular at least somewhere. Okay, so just sort of summarizing the doubt also, not everything works across borders. How do we interpret as, are we speaking about European shows working in the US, which is what, like, for example, the previous paragraph was speaking about it, right? American viewers are billing and all of that. How do we do it? One way is to look at it as borders for multiple countries. An easier way to do it is when we have a question about this, right? That means that we have information in the passage which will tell us what EU audiences will prefer. Given that that is the case, then I will go back and reinterpret saying that. So then that means that all of this has to be related to the EU. Sometimes comedy doesn't work. Murder mysteries and, war and fights and all, they do work. Okay. So now coming back to the remaining questions, 5 again is something which comes from the last paragraph. The author sees the rise of Netflix in Europe as a unifying force. Best would have been a culturally unifying force or something like that, or a cultural unifier. We don't have that, right? So this is the best which we have. We don't have 100% clear answer, but we have the fact that it is unifying, which is what the author is saying here, right? They need to have something in common, even if it is just binging on the same series. It's not an economic threat. In fact, the author is saying that they shouldn't be nervous. They shouldn't worry. It's definitely not a cultural threat because it's going to bring people together. And filling an entertainment gap is also not what the author is trying to say. It might be true. Maybe, there are some gaps which are there and all. Probably not, because we know that, Netflix and what's the other one? Disney Plus, they're only 1/3. There's a lot more. So probably there isn't a gap also. But from the last paragraph, it's easy to infer that it's going to be a unifying force. One reason for mistakes here could be if we are thinking in terms of what other people would do, right? So this makes European politicians nervous. So we don't care about that. We only want the author's view. And that is something which is coming here. Okay, now last question. Based on information provided in the passage, all of the following are true except. So 3 out of these 4 options are going to be right. Whichever is not, that becomes the correct answer. So it's a direct multiple. I always recommend in these type of questions that, unless you have written it and it's 100% right, better to go back and double check once. National broadcasters dominate in the EU in terms of total TV viewing hours, right? So this is something which we were just speaking about it. It was given where we were told that, yeah, so streaming services account for about 1/3 of all viewing hours. National broadcasters still dominate. So this is something which is given, so we can eliminate it. Netflix has been able to transform itself into a truly European entity. Not exactly, right? We have been told that, there are cultural parts which have been stripped out, fewer cultural references, decisions are still being made in LA, so, or US, right? So this ideally becomes my answer. Let's, of course, quickly validate 3 and 4. Only half of Netflix's original programming in the EU is now produced in America. Yeah, that we know, from 75% to half, right? Half of their original content is now American. So this is also correct. European TV productions have the potential to become global hits. Definitely. In fact, we know of one, right? We had that Lupin, which is already a global hit. So, of course, they have the potential. There are many things which work, some which don't work, but many things which work. So 1, 3, and 4, all of these are correct based on the passage. 2 is the only one which is not correct. And again, a large chunk of it we are able to get from the last couple of paragraphs. So this again is something which should be fresh in our memory, and ideally we should get it. So here and there, 1 or 2 mistakes we could make, but 5, 6, right? Actually, if you ask me, pretty much all of it, as long as we are understanding the passage, we definitely can get all of the questions right. 1 or 2, maybe here and there, some reasoning error could happen, which hopefully now you guys understand.